Attitude makes a difference. How the attitude of chronically ill patients can make a difference in their quality of life. Due to a recent personal illness, I have been thinking lately about how other people handle their chronic diseases. I know many people with diabetes and have seen the complications that can arise. I also have family with mental illness and environmental allergies. I am on month 4 of an illness, and sometimes I'm at my wit's end. How do others make it through years of fighting, emotionally, spiritually, physically? As modern medicine has advanced, we have seen an increase in the average lifespan. Diseases that used to kill us 100 years ago are now curable, or at least treatable. 125 years ago, the average lifespan was only 45 years. By 2015, that figure has jumped to 78 years. As our bodies age beyond its natural lifespan, this has meant more medical intervention and more long-term diseases. End-of-life diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's are on the rise. As of 2012, approximately half of the adults in the United States had one or more chronic health condition. 25% had multiple chronic diseases. Of the top 10 causes of death in 2010, 7 were chronic diseases. Heart disease and cancer together made up nearly 50% of the deaths. 86% of all healthcare spending was on treating chronic health conditions. These 50% of adults spend what could be years looking for a diagnosis, taking tests, and hoping for treatments. Often the attitude of others affect their journey. Some patients can be discouraged when doctors, family members, or friends do not believe or understand their symptoms. Chronically ill patients can encounter a number of crushing obstacles. It could be friends and family that do not understand their disease, or doctors who undermine the patient's efforts to educate themselves or don't take the severity of their symptoms seriously. Many patients often find themselves having negative experiences during medical encounters. They are often questioned and judged to either be not ill or imagining their symptoms. They struggle for self-esteem and dignity. As the patients strive to legitimize their illness, they encounter a moral event concerning shame and blame, responsibility and stigmatization. They often have to exhibit great strength in working hard to be taken seriously. In one study, researchers compared the patient's attitudes toward the healthcare experience from 2 different chronic illnesses. Type 1 diabetes, which is considered socially acceptable and backed by science, and environmental sensitivities, still considered socially skeptical without a clean-cut set of tests and diagnoses. Unexpectedly, they found that both the diabetic patients and the environmental sensitivities patients were met with an attitude by healthcare workers of disbelief in the patient's competencies to make decisions on their own behalf. One man told how he was in the hospital for a surgery and his blood sugar went up. The doctor said they needed to give him an intermediate insulin. He said, "No, I will go too low. I will bottom out." The nurse responded with, "We know what's best for you in the hospital." But not long later, he went hypoglycemic. Trying to convince a disbelieving healthcare professional of the seriousness of their symptoms, the patients become labeled as complaining, over-anxious, and obsessed with his or her condition. One patient said, "You know what it is to have been given wrong advice, so you enter the office on the defensive, ready to do battle. They react by being arrogant or cold. You trust them even less." Patients feel considerable frustrations when their own theories or understandings are ridiculed or brushed off by healthcare professionals. Patients also have to deal with work issues. 1/3 of adults in the United States do not get sick pay, and 1/4 do not get vacation time. For those chronic illness sufferers, getting to a doctor can be not only inconvenient, but costly. Taking time off work to see the doctor and again for follow-up tests can leave some patients broke. The current healthcare system was designed for the convenience of doctors at a time when people went to the doctor for an injury or infection. Patients can be running all over town for tests and imaging centers, often carrying their own test results by hand to the doctor. Doctors do put some of the blame on Medicare and the insurance companies. Most of the time, doctors are not allowed to do 2 procedures at the same time. Medicare will not pay for one of them. Insurance companies will often only work with certain imaging centers and labs, and these are not always convenient for the patient. While dealing with a chronic illness can be frustrating and time-consuming, there are some things that patients, their friends and families, and the doctors treating them can do to keep their outlook positive. Make a plan. Doctors. Communication is of key importance when dealing with any patient, but will be of even more value to the chronically ill. In a study done by the Institute for Work and Health in Toronto, Canada, the higher the patient's expectations of a procedure, the better the recovery. A doctor needs to address any fears that arise, particularly when undergoing a procedure. What are the patient's hopes and fears? Addressing those up front can make for a better recovery. It will be up to the doctors and other healthcare professionals to change the socially acceptable attitudes and reactions toward the patients. Inappropriate and counterproductive attitudes need to be dealt with when and where they occur. But also, we need to extend the experiential knowledge that comes with research into chronic illnesses to change what constitutes effective and socially responsible healthcare relationships. Respect, trust, and control are critical to the quality of life with a chronic illness. Make a plan. Friends and family. Many patients with chronic disease do not like to complain. They will suffer silently, and therefore close friends or family may not understand the extent of their pain. Families can help by asking questions. How are you today? Is there anything you need? Can I help you by doing the dishes, making dinner, folding the laundry? If the support systems surrounding the patient are positive and upbeat about helping, the patients will find it easier to accept help. Make a plan. Patience. Be mindful. Being mindful is about being in the moment. Unfortunately, the moment is not always pleasant. Take a few deep breaths and take note of how those breaths feel, in and out. Mindfulness will help you accept the negative emotions without letting them take control. Educate others. One way to make things easier on yourself and others is to educate your friends and family about your chronic illness. A quick search of the internet should produce organizations with information that you can share. Print out key highlights for them. However, beware that there could be some people who never understand, no matter what you say to them. You need to accept them for the way they are. Develop the skill of asking for help. Asking for help can be difficult for many people. This is a skill that needs to be developed. Friends and family that want to help may not know how. Make a list of things you need help with. Make a list of people who could help. Match up the lists. Start small. Ask directly. Don't beat around the bush. Odds are your family and friends are more than willing to help you and want to help, but just don't know how. Let it go. Complaining can be a slippery slope. Once you get started, complaints can take over your entire attitude. Before you start complaining, take a moment and be mindful about it. Is it something you can control? If so, then do what you can. Is it something you cannot control? Then take a deep breath and let it go. Complaining will only add negative emotions to the situation. Be kind. The 14th Dalai Lama once said, "My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness." Be mindful about being kind. It may be a struggle, but you need to remember to be kind to yourself. When you think of a negative judgment of yourself, pause for a moment and think of something kind. Do the same for others. Leave the house in the morning dedicated to kindness, and you can change your entire attitude. Remember, you don't always have to be positive. It is not always possible to be positive. There will be days when you are weary of being ill. downhearted, or negative. You need to embrace these moments too. Do not try to force a positive mood upon yourself. Wait it out. This will pass. While struggling with a chronic disease is not easy, there are many steps doctors and patients can take to lighten the load. The key is to be mindful, aware of what is happening and how it is happening. With a positive attitude, patients can heal faster and better. With the help of healthcare providers, patients with chronic diseases can learn to take control and maintain a positive outlook.